Welcome to the podcast. I'm Tosh Taylor.
And I'm Jenna Morton, and we are so excited. Like I always say every week, I really need to come up with a new line, but
we'll work on that.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I am very, very excited today is that we have realized this is our 100th episode.
We have been talking about 100 episodes since episode one. Since episode one. So I thought I'd bust out this old school. This was season 1. We made T-shirts. And then they disappeared, and we never made them again. So I hold on to this baby, and I don't bust it out very often, actually.
That's true, and we really should have coordinated because I have mine at home. And
I should have mentioned it before I left the house for her.
I would have worn it.
But thank you for doing 100 episodes with me.
Well, thank you for agreeing to my crazy idea.
So I say it took us 3 seasons to get to 100, so 100 more?
Of course.
Okay, all right, you heard it.
You know, we've done 100, but we haven't done 100 with our team here at Rogers. So,
see?
We gotta keep going.
New goals. New goals all the time.
And we have so many fantastic guests still to come. So yeah, we definitely have at least 100 more episodes in us. And today we have a guest that I think people are going to be very excited to hear from because it's a topic that is just constantly on people's minds. But I think especially right now as we try to come out of real hibernation pandemic mode and face what is usually another huge step in personal nutrition going into the winter and into the holidays. So we have invited Jillian Reid to join us today. Hello.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me today, and congratulations on your 100 episodes. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was, it kind of just crept up on us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a surprise to me yesterday when Jenna messaged me. I should have brought some champagne for today's show, but it's early in the morning. It's early in the morning. So we want to talk to you today about something like I love food. I say it all the time.
Yes.
But I love food that's good for me. I'm not much of a sugar person, but we all know, especially with Halloween that just passed. Yeah. We are like yin and yang here. Yeah. So, but first, let's talk about you. So how about you tell us all about you?
Great. So yeah, my name is Jillian Reid, and I'm a registered dietitian here in Moncton. So I've been a dietitian since 2013, and I've worked in a couple different settings. So I've worked in a nursing home, and then I also spent quite a few of my years as a dietitian at a grocery store, kind of as a community dietitian. And then recently I have started a new venture. So I have started with Reconnect Health in August. So if you haven't heard of Reconnect Health yet, we are a multidisciplinary center here in Moncton, and we focus on women's health. And it's really special because it's all women healthcare professionals as well. So I've been really excited to join the team and to also focus my passion, which is on women's health. So I've been doing that since August, so it's been an exciting few months.
That's so exciting. We are big fans of Reconnect.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyone who's followed the podcast for a while, you'll realize that a lot of people who are with Reconnect have been guests already.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the ones that haven't will end up.
Yeah.
We'll make them either way.
So tell us a little bit more about why it is that you want to focus on women's health and women's nutrition especially.
Yeah, so I think there's a few reasons. So I think the first one, I think from a young age, women are often kind of fed diet culture messaging and also kind of fed a certain message to look a certain way and that we can't be happy until we do look that way. So from the time that we're young, we are often given those kind of mixed diet messages from diet culture and have a lot of pressure on ourselves. And then also, as we become moms, we often get very busy and often put our own needs kind of on the back burner. So I think that when I became a mom a few years ago, so I have almost 3-year-old, Alice, I realized just how much support women need and oftentimes encouragement and support to put their own needs first and to focus on self-care. So to be able to kind of help moms and busy women to find ways to eat healthy despite their busy lifestyles, that's what really excites me. So to help support women throughout their journey, whether they're trying to conceive or they're pregnant or going through those first few months postpartum or the busy kind of family meal planning kind of stuff, right? So just to help women throughout that really is what kind of my passion is, just because I think there is a lot of support we need and that we don't often get.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a lot of, I don't think it's misinformation. Like, I mean, the diet culture is one thing.
Yes.
But even without that, even those of us, I think, who are raised to like, oh yeah, you're supposed to eat a balanced diet. You're supposed to eat healthy, without understanding what that actually means. That's what I've realized, as a almost middle-aged woman now, going, oh, yeah, eating healthy doesn't just mean not eating sugary, terrible things. It's much more nuanced than that.
Definitely.
And I think that's what you can help with,
yes,
right?
And that's exactly it. A lot of times women might or might not have tried multiple different diets out there, and they're just at a place where they're confused. They're like, what should I eat? And it almost becomes at a certain point that they're no longer even enjoying food or enjoying the process of food because they are so confused and frustrated and time, of course. So it's all of these things that they're just looking for support because they want to know what to eat, when to eat, and kind of find that enjoyment in food again too.
There's also the miscommunication in labels, right?
Yes,
They're so much fun because they can say, the light or the diet or the gluten-free or whatever.
Yes.
A lot of people assume, say gluten-free, for example. If it says gluten-free on the box, then it's healthy. No, it's actually most of the time quite the opposite, right?
Yeah, so marketing is a huge piece. They'll kind of tag along with whatever the latest diet is and kind of use some of those trendy words to try to make their product look great. That's exactly it. I'll always say, don't just read the front of the package. Let's understand the label and what you're actually looking for, because the label itself can't necessarily lie or tweak. But definitely some of those trendy words on the front of the package can definitely influence people's choices for sure.
And that's one thing that I've noticed, I've tried to learn a little bit more about, but I've noticed even from an education standpoint, my kids come home and that's what they're starting to be taught, which is so much better than what I was taught.
Yeah.
But for people that are kind of listening, going, okay, yeah, but what does that mean? What are some of the things that we should be looking for? What are some of those tips and balances that we should be looking for?
So I find the biggest things, everybody's going to be a little bit different, but I find the biggest thing, if there's just one piece, is just to think about eating your regular meals and also making sure they're balanced. So an easy way to know if your meal is balanced would be if half the plate is vegetables, a quarter of the plate protein, and a quarter plate whole grain. You can use that as your basic kind of starting point for lunch and supper. And if you're looking at the label, there's definitely different pieces on the label that we can look at, but we're usually looking at fiber, protein, and also, of course, sugar and sodium, and watching those pieces too. But those would be kind of the main things to look for on the label too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a million questions
Yeah.
in my head at the moment. So let's say I walk into you and
Yes.
I have been raised on the Canada Food Guide.
Yeah.
And and we grew up in the generation where your parents all those TV meals suddenly became available,
Yeah.
right? Everything became easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here you go.
A little brownie mixed in there.
Yeah, you gotta have the dessert.
Yeah.
It's like my kids with Lunchables now. They're so obsessed with Lunchables.
Yes.
It's the treat, but it's here you go. Here's a whole bunch of fake food.
Yeah.
Enjoy. But anyway, that's my point is, how do we know how to make things easier? I know that, like you said, there should be this many vegetables on the plate.
Yes.
But for so many people, vegetables are potatoes and carrots and beans, let's say.
Yeah.
How do you learn to cook all these other things and make it seem as easy as popping something in the oven?
So that's exactly it. I do help people with kind of meal planning. So I have a bank of recipes I'll go to and kind of help pick them based on what they like and dislike. But a lot of times it's just, once again, making it simple. So it might be doing something like transforming a salad into something like a grain bowl. So having chopped up spinach and peppers and cucumbers as your veggies, and then mixing in some couscous or quinoa and maybe some black beans, and making that a lunch for a few days. So that takes little prep. It would maybe take 20 minutes or so, but it transforms kind of the vegetables to be into that grain bowl piece, instead of always just kind of having the veggies on the side, like you said, like a carrot or a potato or something like that. But a lot of times I will say frozen vegetables are just as healthy as fresh, so that's an easy way to get them in as well. And you can do different things. So there's stir fry blends of veggies, and like I said, using things like bell peppers or carrots or cucumber. It doesn't have to be a specific vegetable by any means, but just just using different ones and finding different ways to use them for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm getting hungry.
Yeah.
Should have been like a veggie tray on the table.
Yeah.
There. Yeah. Without the dip. Yeah.
Yes. So what are some of your tips you can help people that are listening and watching right now that are like, yeah, I know I should do better, but like, how do I start?
So I think that's a good point. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And we know that if it is all or nothing, 80% of the time people will go back to their old ways. So we want to make sure that it's not all of a sudden transforming their whole life, because that becomes overwhelming, that becomes daunting and time consuming. So we know that that's not sustainable. So oftentimes I'll listen to what they're doing now, what their routine is now, and we'll start with little pieces. And I'll say that most of the time I find what's happening is we're just not eating enough. So that sounds silly, but a lot of times that's what it stems from. So it could be that as busy women, we're not eating our breakfast or we're not eating our lunch. And then by the end of the day, it makes sense that all of a sudden we're craving quick, easy carbs that we can get into us as fast as we can and turning to those easy convenience foods. So sometimes it's as simple as saying, okay, let's eat our regular meals and start listening to our body a little bit more and listening to our hunger and our fullness cues a little bit more. And oftentimes by doing that, you'll start to notice you might be craving the sweets a little bit less, or craving and turning less to those kind of convenience foods a little bit less often. So yeah, I find basically let's see where you're at now and start with those little things that we can tweak. So oftentimes that is making sure you're eating your regular meals and snacks, making sure that you're trying to get some veggies and fruits into your diet, and just kind of starting there. And it seems small, but those are the things that will make a difference overall.
What are some cues that women could take from their bodies to know that they need to start changing their diet?
So that's a good point. And I find that oftentimes turning back or thinking back to that body's hunger and fullness cues is a good piece of that. So sometimes if you notice that you're not hungry for half the morning or half the day, that's a big cue that your metabolism is already kind of slowing down a little bit, and that your hunger cues are now muted because you haven't ate throughout the day, and now your body's used to not eating until maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So really starting to listen to your body's hunger, and if you're noticing that your stomach's starting to growl, then once again you might have waited too long to eat in that case, because if your stomach's growling, it's already a little bit too late. We want to make sure you're eating before that point. So those are some good cues, like listening to and thinking of the day of if there is any point that you're hungry or going long periods without eating. Those would be 2 cues there. But also if you're just not feeling well overall, if you're kind of low energy, if you're feeling bloated and digestive wise, if you're constipated. I know it's not things you always want to talk about, but I talk about it a lot. I'm a mom, right? Yeah. So I talk about it.
We've had Katie Kelly talk about it.
Yes, there we go. So yeah, if you are not going to the bathroom regularly, there's definitely some things we can do digestive health-wise to help that too. So I would say those would be the main things, like listening to your body's hunger and fullness, if you're going long periods without eating, but also digestion-wise too. Those would be some cues that maybe you need a little bit of support along the way.
You know, we usually, like, as moms are always like, oh, I'm tired all the time. But it's, I mean, yeah, we're tired all the time, but sometimes it has to do with
Definitely,
you know,
yeah.
oh, my kid didn't finish their meal, so I'm going to finish it, right? Like, how many times have you done that?
Yeah.
Right? A million times.
So many.
Yeah. Like, I'll just
You
have
know
these
what?
scraps.
I had finally kind of like broke myself of that habit. Like many other bad habits, I took the time, I put the work in, I got rid of them, and then I started to slip, and then we went into the pandemic, and I went back right into all those nasty habits.
Yeah.
And I noticed the other day, I was like, oh, that chicken nugget's still good. I'm like, why am I eating
I don't need it.
half-eaten leftovers?
But once again, maybe you weren't eating before that. Like maybe, and I do find that a lot of times parents, like lunch is a good example. A lot of times we're worried about what we're feeding our family, but not actually sitting down and eating our own lunch. So it makes sense that you'd be kind of nibbling away, but we want to make sure that you're sitting down too and eating your lunch too.
And I think sometimes for me, it's that mental of like, well, I can't go to waste.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I bought that, and how much I'm going to have to buy again, and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, no, it can't go to waste. No, you're an adult. Sometimes it's okay.
Yes.
You need to get a dog. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to say we don't have a lot of waste with our dog. Yeah.
Us either. Everything just goes in her dish. Yeah.
Claire is not allowed to listen to this.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Clara. I apologize.
So if you don't have a dog,
So yes, if you're worried about food waste with kids too, I always say like do really small portions so that it's not overwhelming to them. But then if they eat it all, you can always put more on there too. And that way it can control the food waste without having to feed the dog.
My kids are sugar fiends, as
Yes.
most children are.
Yes.
And Sarah, my oldest, we're 5 minutes into supper. What's for dessert?
Yes.
Every single night. And anyway, it drives me bonkers. Do you have it, like, what are some, like, half decent things that I could offer for dessert that aren't, small pieces of Halloween candy that are loaded
Yes.
with sugar, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what she's going for, but what can I, fake her out with?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I definitely find there's a few things there. So first of all, if you do find that they're always kind of preoccupied with the dessert piece, oftentimes a tip that I'll give is to serve the dessert with the meal. And I know a lot of times parents are a little bit hesitant to do that, but you'd be surprised oftentimes once they get used to that, you'll find that they'll kind of maybe take a piece of the dessert, but then they'll start eating the rest of their meal because they know that that's kind of the new kind of normal at the mealtime. So that way they're not always kind of preoccupied with, oh, I'm full, I want dessert. By serving it with the meal, it can actually help. So I usually give that tip. It's worth trying. Like I said, if it's new and novel, they might eat it all first and then maybe pick away at the meal, but then you'll see that they'll start to kind of normalize it a little bit. But then there's that balance, like you said, of finding like those sugary Halloween treats, but then trying to choose some nutritious kind of dessert options too. So sometimes it's tricky, but I did a reducing sugar workshop last night, webinar. And so some of the tips I gave in that are things like energy bites. So you can do little energy bites, and actually it's great if you do have like Smarties from Halloween left over, you can mix it in the energy bites. So it's a little bit of, a little bit of that chocolate in there, but then it has the oats and the peanut butter and flaxseed and that type of thing. So energy bites are one of my go-tos, little breakfast cookies that you can reduce the sugar in, so baked kind of breakfast cookies. Smoothies can be a fun option too that you can have with the meal, and it has a little bit of sweetness. Also things like apple nachos, so those are one of my favorites. You just cut up apples and slice them fine on a plate, and then you can drizzle peanut butter with either chopped nuts or mini chocolate chips and coconut. So that's a really fun option too, is the apple nachos.
Oh man, your kids are just as bad with apples as mine. They devour them, so
Yeah.
that would be huge.
So it's fun.
That could be a good one.
Yeah.
And they can kind of put their own little toppings on
And
it.
they like get nachos. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
Sold. Look at the trains
Yeah.
just going.
Honestly, I will be completely honest. The train in my head is like, oh, and then I have to cut them all up, and then I have to have
Yes.
this, and then I have to have that, and
Sometimes the work that goes into it, right? Yeah.
because for the most part, mine would just eat an apple and be happy with
Yeah.
it. So
Yes.
Yeah.
I could get away with it. But it's also like that's the kind of thing too that you can get your kid involved with. right?
Exactly.
Like that
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be work intensive for you.
Exactly.
It could be a fun thing to do together,
Yeah.
or where my daughter's 9 now, I'm like, you can do this.
Yes, it's a good weekend activity, and that's exactly it. It's good as they get older, they can definitely do it themselves too, which is great. Yeah.
Interesting.
That's what I need. I just need to train her to make better
Yes.
food for all of us.
Yes.
That's fair. She's enjoying the
Yeah.
cooking, so
Yeah, she does like to
Yeah.
cook. But she likes to experiment. She likes to not follow recipes, so sometimes it doesn't turn out so good for all of us.
But she's learning, so that's awesome.
Well, yes, yeah. So we let it
Yeah.
go. We're like,
it's like my family.
Yeah.
Because I do the same thing. I'm like, oh, this doesn't need any sugar in
Yeah.
it. It did. It really did.
Yeah.
Like, what are some, like if you're like
Yeah.
me and you want to take the sugar out, what are some great
Definitely.
replacements?
So I find a lot of times in the recipe, we will say you have to leave some of the sugar. So it definitely uses, it's important for like the texture and the overall taste. But usually you can reduce the sugar by up to 1/3. So that's a good starting point. So if it calls for a cup, you can kind of bring that down. So that's one tip. A lot of times you can replace it too with things like applesauce or mashed banana. So if it is something like a muffin or a breakfast cookie, sometimes that type of thing will work. You can also use things like dates that are a little bit sweeter already. So those are a few little tips. You don't necessarily have to replace it with something like a sugar alternative. So we wouldn't necessarily say to do that, but you can definitely still reduce the amount of sugar in it. And overall, if you're eating your balanced meals and balanced snacks, and then you're having like one dessert in the run of a day, that one dessert isn't going to be what kind of makes or breaks your diet, right? So it's also to find that place of balance, like I said.
Depends on
It's
how
helpful.
big serving you
Yes,
have.
yes. It definitely is true. So mindful eating is definitely something I work on too. So finding those strategies of making sure we are actually, when we're sitting down with our dessert, are we actually enjoying it, or are we scarfing it down before we can even really taste it, right? So mindful eating strategies can definitely help with that too, so that you are kind of enjoying and savoring it, and you might be satisfied with a smaller portion that way too.
I keep most of my stuff in the freezer.
Yeah.
So that, you have that time, the thinking period, like, am I going to wait for this to thaw out?
Yeah.
Do I want it that bad? The answer is 95% of the time, yes.
Yeah.
Or I'll try to gnaw away on it while it's frozen.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah, and I think that mindfulness part of it is so important. It's something I think particularly in like North American culture, we are
Definitely.
so bad at taking that time to enjoy. And
Yes.
I think hopefully that might be one of those silver linings, that although some of us may have overindulged in what we enjoyed during the pandemic, we at least started taking the time to do that again.
Yes, I 100% agree that it definitely kind of showed us the importance of slowing down and enjoying everything, but I think that's exactly it with eating. We're so busy. I mean, we are a lot of times busy with our children, our own lives, and it's just go, go, go all the time, but really taking that time to slow down, chew our food, because that can help with some of the bloating and digestive stuff too, but also to enjoy the food and realize that we can usually be satisfied with smaller portions that way, but definitely key, yeah.
It's funny that you say that, the chewing. Just quickly, I remember like my grandfather, to chew every bite 100 times.
Yes.
And I always just laughed at it, but then I found out as I got older that that's a real thing. Like, you really should chew more.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's definitely putting more work on our digestive system if we're just kind of quickly kind of shoveling it down, right? So definitely important, yeah.
Awesome.
So we need to wrap things up, but I'm going to say that one of the best tips that I've come across in terms of keeping all this stuff top of mind is to follow someone like you who shares it on social media, so
Yes.
it pops up in your face and you're like, oh right,
Yes.
I should hydrate, I should do this. Where can people find you?
Definitely. So you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook at Jillian Reid RD, and also you can also follow at Reconnect Health as well. We have a lot going on in our center, so it's also a great page to follow too.
Yeah, you guys have lots of workshops and
Yeah.
lots of stuff going on. So
Yeah, there's
we'll
always
be sure
something.
to add all those links in the show notes and the comments if you're finding us online.
Perfect.
Perfect. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hopefully, our listeners and our viewers can sit down and maybe put the bowl of candy away for today, or put it in the freezer and then really think about it.
Yes.
And then go back for
just work it into the energy balls.
Yes.
Yeah.
Old Halloween candy works really well to decorate gingerbread houses coming up, so tuck some of that away. Pull it back
Smart.
out.
Good tip.
Smart.
Yeah.
That's right. I was actually thinking of
Yeah.
turning an advent calendar into a candy one because my one child doesn't like chocolate. So
There you go. Save the Halloween
Repurpose.
candy.
Yes.
There you go. Don't buy new
Repurpose.
ones. Just repurpose.
yeah. Okay. Thanks again. See you next week.